There is a kind of tired that sleep cannot fix, a kind of empty that no amount of scrolling can fill. And if you are honest with yourself tonight, you already know exactly what that feels like. You have smiled through meetings, you have answered messages, you have shown up for everyone who needed you. And somewhere along the way, you forgot to ask yourself if you were okay. This is for you. Not for the version of you that has it all together, not for the version of you that posts the highlight reel, but for the real one, the one lying awake right now, wondering if anyone actually sees what you carry. Long before you learned to hide your pain behind a smile, God already knew the weight you were carrying. He is not surprised by your exhaustion. He is not disappointed by your doubt. He has watched you fight battles no one else even knew existed, and he has never once looked away. There is a verse tucked into the middle of an old, worn book that says he collects every tear you cry into a bottle, that he writes each one down in a record, as if your pain were something sacred, something worth remembering. Think about that for a moment. Not one tear wasted, not one sleepless night ignored, not one silent prayer forgotten in the noise of the world. You were never invisible to him, even when you felt invisible to everyone else. Even when the room was full of people and you still felt completely alone. Even when you smiled at the dinner table while something inside you was quietly breaking. He saw it all, and he stayed close through all of it. This is not a distant God watching from far away, arms folded, waiting for you to fix yourself before he draws near. This is a God who moves toward broken things, not away from them. A shepherd does not abandon the one sheep who wandered off the path. He leaves the 99 who are safe, and he goes looking, through the thorns, through the dark, through the places no one else was willing to search. That is the kind of love we are talking about tonight. Not a love that waits for you to earn it, but a love that runs toward you while you are still far off, still covered in the dust of everywhere you have been. So if tonight you feel like the one who wandered, if tonight you feel like the mess is too big, the mistakes too many, the silence too long, hear this clearly. You have not wandered too far. You have not fallen too low. There is no version of your story that surprises him, and there is no chapter so dark that he cannot still write something beautiful into it. Maybe you have heard people say that faith is supposed to feel strong, unshakable, certain, but nobody tells you what to do on the nights when it feels like a flicker instead of a flame, when it feels like you are holding on by nothing more than a thread. So let this be said plainly tonight. A flickering faith is still faith, a whispered prayer is still a prayer, and a heart that is barely hanging on is still a heart that God has not let go of. There is an old story about a woman who had been sick for 12 long years, 12 years of doctors who could not help her, 12 years of money spent, and hope slowly draining away, 12 years of people around her growing tired of her pain, while she was still living inside it every single day. And on the day she finally found him in the crowd, she did not ask for a conversation. She did not ask for a sermon. She simply reached out, quietly, desperately, and touched the edge of his robe. That is all it took. Not a perfect prayer, not a polished testimony, not even a full sentence. Just a trembling hand reaching through the noise because she believed that even the edge of him was enough. And it was enough. He turned around and called her daughter. He told her that her faith had healed her. He saw her. In a crowd of hundreds, he still saw her. Maybe tonight you feel like that woman. Tired, unseen, running out of options. Wondering if anyone will ever notice the thing you have been carrying quietly for years. Maybe you have stopped asking for a miracle and started just asking to survive the week. Hear this clearly. He still turns around for the ones who reach out, even when the reach is small, even when the faith is shaking, even when the hand barely brushes the edge of what is holy. You do not need a perfect prayer to get his attention. You do not need eloquent words or a spotless past. You only need to reach, however weak that reaching might be. Because the God who noticed one woman in a crushing crowd is the same God who notices you tonight, in your room, in your car, in the quiet corner where nobody else is watching. He is not looking for the loudest voice in the room. He is not moved by performance. He is moved by honesty, by the trembling hand, by the whispered prayer that says, I do not know if you can hear me, but I am reaching anyway. And if that is where you are tonight, reaching without certainty, hoping without proof, that is not weak faith, that is real faith. Because real faith is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to reach out even while the fear is still there, still standing right beside you, still whispering that it will not work this time. There is a question that quietly follows so many people through their lives, a question they rarely say out loud, but carry everywhere they go. And that question is simply this: am I enough? Am I enough for the people around me? Am I enough for the family I am trying to hold together? Am I enough for the job, the marriage, the calling, the version of myself I keep trying to become? And underneath all of that, there is an even quieter question, one whispered only in the dark: am I enough for God? Tonight, let that question finally be answered. You were never asked to be enough on your own, because the whole point of grace was never about you having enough. It was about him being enough and choosing to pour that enough into you. Think about a man named Peter, a fisherman with rough hands and a quick temper, a man who denied even knowing Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times, on the very night his friend needed him the most. Imagine the shame of that morning. Imagine hearing the rooster crow and realizing exactly what you had just done. Peter could have spent the rest of his life defined by that failure. He could have decided that one collapse meant he was disqualified forever. But that is not how the story ends. On a quiet morning by the same sea where it all began, Jesus sat with him over a fire, and instead of listing his failures, instead of shaming him in front of the others, he simply asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" 3 questions to undo 3 denials, 3 chances to stand back up in the exact place he had fallen down. And then he gave him something no one expected. He gave him purpose. "Feed my sheep," he said, as if to say, your failure does not disqualify you. It prepares you to understand grace in a way you never could have otherwise. Maybe tonight you are carrying your own version of that morning by the fire, some failure you have never forgiven yourself for, some moment you keep replaying, wondering if it erased everything good that came before it. Hear this clearly: it did not. Your worst moment is not your final chapter. The same God who sat with Peter by that fire is sitting with you right now, not to shame you, not to remind you of what you already know, but to ask you gently, "Do you love me?" and to hand you a purpose on the other side of your failure that you could not have carried without it. This is the God who takes broken things and does not throw them away. He restores them. He repurposes them. He takes the very cracks in your story and lets his light pour through them into places that would have never been reached by someone who had never fallen at all. There is a moment in every person's life when the waiting becomes almost unbearable, when the promise still feels far away and the silence in between feels like it might swallow you whole. Maybe you are waiting for a marriage to heal. Maybe you are waiting for a diagnosis to change. Maybe you are waiting for a child to come home, or a door to finally open after years of it staying shut. And in that waiting, It is so easy to believe that God has gone quiet, that he has moved on to someone else's prayer while yours sits untouched on some shelf in heaven. But think about a man named Abraham, an old man given a promise that seemed almost laughable, that he would become the father of a great nation, at an age when most men were simply hoping for a peaceful end to their days. Years passed. Nothing happened. He watched his body grow older. He watched the promise seem more impossible with every passing season. And yet, somewhere in that long and painful waiting, something was being built in him that could not have been built any other way. Patience was being carved into his character. Trust was being deepened in the soil of delay. And by the time the promise finally arrived, it arrived not just as a gift, but as proof that waiting had never meant forgotten. Maybe tonight you feel like Abraham, standing in a waiting room that has lasted far longer than you ever expected, wondering if the promise spoken over your life quietly expired somewhere along the way. Hear this clearly: delay is not denial. A door that has not opened yet is not a door that will never open. The same God who kept his word to a man who waited decades is not suddenly unfaithful in your particular season of waiting. He is not slow. He is simply working on a timeline that considers things you cannot yet see, a timeline that is preparing not only your circumstances, but also you, shaping you into someone capable of carrying the very thing you are asking for. Think about a seed planted in the ground, buried in darkness, seemingly doing nothing for weeks, and yet underneath the surface, roots are forming, life is beginning. Everything necessary for growth is quietly happening exactly where no one can see it. Your waiting season might feel like nothing is happening, but roots are being formed, character is being shaped, and the very thing you have been asking for is being prepared, both for you and in you, in ways that only become visible once the waiting is finally over. So do not despise this season, even in its ache, even in its long and quiet nights, because the same faithfulness that kept every promise before yours is still holding on to the one written over your life right now. There is a fear that lives quietly inside so many hearts, a fear that says, if people really knew everything about me, they would leave. So people build walls, they perform, they smile in photographs while carrying storms no camera could ever capture, and they let almost no one close enough to see the real, unfinished, unpolished truth of who they actually are. But there was a woman at a well, in the middle of the day, alone, because she had learned to avoid the crowds who whispered about her past. 5 husbands, and the man she was with now was not even her husband, a life that had left her exhausted from trying to find love in all the wrong places. And there, at that well, in the heat of the afternoon, a stranger asked her for water, and then, without flinching, without stepping back in judgment, he told her everything she had ever done and stayed. He did not leave. He did not recoil. He offered her something he called living water, a well inside her that would never run dry. And for the first time in years, she felt fully known and still fully wanted. She ran back into the town she had been avoiding, no longer hiding, and told everyone, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the one we have been waiting for?" The very thing she thought would expose her and drive people away became the very thing that set her free. Maybe tonight you are protecting a secret, a season of your life you have never told anyone about, a decision you made that you believe would change how people looked at you if they ever found out. Hear this clearly. He already knows. There is nothing you could confess that would surprise him, nothing buried so deep that it changes his desire to sit with you at the well. He is not waiting for you to clean yourself up first. He is inviting you exactly as you are into a conversation that does not end in shame, but in living water, water that reaches into the driest, most exhausted parts of your life and does not just satisfy for a moment, it satisfies for good. This is what real love looks like. Love that knows the whole story and stays anyway. Love that does not require a performance, only a willingness to sit down at the well and finally stop pretending to be thirsty for anything less than what he actually offers. There is a kind of grief that does not announce itself loudly. It simply moves into a person's life and stays, showing up in the empty chair at dinner, in the phone number you cannot bring yourself to delete, in the silence where a familiar voice used to be. Maybe you have lost someone you loved. Maybe you have lost a dream you spent years building. Maybe you have lost a version of your own life that you quietly grieve, even though no one else understands why. Because to everyone else it just looks like moving forward, but to you it feels like carrying something heavy that never quite gets lighter. There is a story of two sisters, Mary and Martha, standing at the tomb of their brother. And even though they had watched him grow sick and die, even though they had already buried him days before, when Jesus finally arrived, Mary fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And what did he do in that moment? Faced with grief so raw it could barely speak, he did not rush past it with a lecture about resurrection. He did not remind her too quickly that everything would be fine. He wept. The one who held the power to raise the dead still stopped, still felt the weight of loss, still let his own tears fall in front of everyone watching. This tells you something important about the heart of God. He does not ask you to skip your grief to get to your miracle. He does not require you to fake strength before he moves on your behalf. He weeps with you first. And then, after he wept, he called out to the tomb, and the man who had been dead for 4 days walked back out into the light. Maybe tonight you are standing at your own kind of tomb, staring at something you were sure was final, wondering if there is any point in still hoping. Hear this clearly. He weeps with you in the loss. And he still has the power to call life back into the places you thought were sealed shut forever. Nothing is too far gone for him. Not a relationship, not a dream, not a piece of your own heart you thought had died permanently. The same voice that called a man out of a tomb after 4 days is still speaking life into dead situations today, and he is not in a hurry to rush your grief. But he is also not finished writing your story, not even close, not even now. So here you are, at the end of this word, and maybe something in the last few minutes reached a place inside you that you had not let anyone touch in a very long time. Maybe it was the woman who reached out with a trembling hand. Maybe it was Peter standing by the fire. Maybe it was the long wait of Abraham, or the woman at the well who finally stopped hiding, or the tomb that could not stay sealed forever. Whatever it was, do not let it end here. Do not let it fade the moment the screen goes dark and the noise of tomorrow comes rushing back in. Carry it with you, into the kitchen, into the car, into the meeting you are dreading, into the conversation you have been avoiding, into the quiet moment right before you fall asleep tonight. Because the truth you just heard was never meant to just be heard. It was meant to be lived, planted deep enough in your heart that it changes the way you walk through tomorrow morning. You are not forgotten. You are not too far gone. You are not disqualified by your past, and you are not being punished by your waiting. You are being seen. You are being held. You are being written into a story far bigger than the one your fear has been telling you. If any part of this reached you tonight, if any line felt like it was written just for you, do not keep that to yourself. Share it with someone who is quietly fighting a battle you may not even know about, because you never know whose sleepless night this might interrupt, whose whispered prayer this might finally answer. Comment below and tell us which line found you tonight, because your honesty might become the exact courage someone else needs to keep going one more day. And if these words mean something to you, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and let this be a place you return to again and again, not because you need to hear something new every time, but because sometimes the heart simply needs to be reminded of what is already true. The storm outside your window may not be over yet. The waiting may still stretch on. The grief may still ache in the quiet hours, but the foundation underneath you was never sand. It was rock, and it was rock long before you ever knew to look for it. So stand on it tonight. Breathe a little easier tonight, and walk into tomorrow knowing that you were never alone in any of this. Not for a single moment, not even now.